The first night Seong-Min spent in Georgia, he sat on Sierra's porch in complete silence. Not the poised, princely silence she remembered from the palace gardens. This was something else. A silence laced with disbelief. The old wooden swing groaned beneath him. The stars above were alien, spread wider, brighter, less symmetrical than the ones he'd studied back home. And in the distance, some metal beast, a semi-truck, rumbled like an army on wheels. He flinched. "Relax," Sierra murmured from beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "Just a delivery truck. They make noise. We've made peace with it." His eyes narrowed. "This delivery beast, it is fed what?" She tried not to laugh. "Diesel. You don't have to feed it oats." A pause. "That seems unnatural." She laughed anyway. In the morning, he stood in her kitchen, squinting at the microwave like it had insulted his ancestors. "You said this box cooks?" he asked, arms folded across his chest, hair tied loosely at his nape. "It heats," Sierra replied, cracking eggs into a pan. "It's not sorcery. It's science." He tilted his head. "And you're not concerned it hums like an angry spirit?" She looked over her shoulder, amused. "You lived through war and palace betrayal, but a whirlpool microwave is where you draw the line?" "I did not trust the court physician either." "Not the same thing. You haven't met your microwave." Later, Sierra took him to Walmart. He froze at the sliding glass doors, watching them part without touch. His hand darted to his side, where no sword lay. "Automatic doors," she whispered, gently placing her palm against his chest. "You're okay." Inside was worse. Bright lights, dozens of aisles, endless choices, neon signs, children screaming joyfully, plastic horses. He stood in front of one, baffled, hand hovering just above its glossy, molded mane. "This is not real." "Nope, it's a toy," Sierra explained. He turned to her, deadpan. "Your world makes jest of beasts," she snorted. "Well, not Onyx, obviously." His brows furrowed. "If they made him into one of these, I would declare war." Back at home, Sierra watched from the hallway as Seong-Min slowly learned to scroll through her phone. He held the phone delicately, like a sword forged from glass, fingers hesitant but curious. "Siri," he said slowly to the voice assistant. "Play The Sound of the Sea." The phone obliged. Waves filled the room. Seong-Min flinched again, but didn't drop it. Instead, he closed his eyes. "It sounds like the cove outside the palace." Sierra leaned in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, warmth swelling in her. "You're learning fast." He opened one eye. "I have an excellent teacher." She smiled. "Flattery won't stop me from teaching you to load the dishwasher." His groan echoed across the kitchen. That night, the rain returned. Not a storm, but soft drizzles tapping on the tin roof of her grandfather's old barn. Sierra found him outside, barefoot on the porch again, wrapped in a flannel jacket, hair tied back but curling loose at the edges. She didn't ask if he was okay. She sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, quiet, present. Finally, after what felt like the whole night breathing between them, she whispered, "Are you afraid of this world?" He turned to her, expression unreadable. Then, softly, simply, "Not if you're in it." Sierra didn't speak again. She just reached over and took his hand. He didn't let go. The day began with shouting. Well, not shouting in the traditional sense, but Seong-Min's voice, sharp with accusation and steeped in old-school command, definitely carried across the entire neighborhood. Sierra ran out of the house barefoot, holding a mug of coffee and wearing pajama shorts. only to find her dignified, battle-hardened, time-traveled prince standing in the middle of the front yard, sword stance activated, aimed at Mr. Barker's riding lawnmower. "Seong-Min!" she called out, sprinting over. His eyes never left the rumbling machine across the hedge. "It growls like a war beast and eats the land." "It's a John Deere," she groaned, gripping his arm. "A lawnmower, not a dragon." "It advances slowly, strategically." His eyes narrowed, as if testing my defenses. Sierra turned to her elderly neighbor, who was now watching from his porch, frozen mid-mow, a baseball cap clutched to his chest. "I am so sorry, Mr. Barker. My friend is just adjusting." Mr. Barker gave a nervous nod. "Tell him I come in peace." "I'll do my best," she muttered, dragging Seong-Min back toward the porch. "You're embarrassing me," Sierra said flatly once they were inside. She crossed her arms, one eyebrow lifted in disbelief. "I was defending your borders," he said solemnly, brushing invisible dust from the sleeve of his borrowed flannel. She blinked. "From what, topiary warfare?" He didn't answer, just glanced outside again, suspiciously. She burst out laughing. He smiled faintly, still defensive, but slightly pleased with himself. "I would not mock you if a beast devoured your homeland." Sierra grinned. "That thing devours grass, not honor." Later, after breakfast, where Seong-Min refused to believe bacon came from pigs. "It tastes too divine to be swine." Sierra left for town to run errands. That afternoon, Seong-Min wandered to the back porch where Sierra's grandfather, Elijah Vaughn, sat carving a hickory cane. Elijah didn't say much at first, just nodded once in greeting and offered Seong-Min a cold bottle of root beer. He took it cautiously. "It fizzes," he noted. "That's the point," Elijah said. "It's got kick, like Sierra." They sat for a while, silent but comfortable. Two men with different histories, bonded by their love for the same whirlwind of a woman. Eventually, Elijah spoke again. "You've seen things, fought things, lost, too, I imagine." "I've buried brothers," Seong-Min said quietly, "betrayed by ones who wore my crest. I've fought wars I didn't start. I've loved only once." Elijah's hands paused on the cane. "That last one," he said, "hurts the longest, but it saves you too, if it's real." Seong-Min nodded slowly. Elijah continued, voice low. "The world's different now. Things move faster, but dignity still matters. Not the kind you wear on your chest, the kind that keeps you grounded when everything else wants to spin you off your feet." "You speak as one who knows." "I was a black man in 1960s Alabama with dreams bigger than a cotton field," Elijah said, a smile curling the edge of his mouth. "I know." Seong-Min looked down at his hands. "I came from a place where honor was your currency, your breath, where your worth was measured by sacrifice." "And now?" Elijah asked. He didn't answer. That evening, Sierra found him standing alone at the edge of her pasture, staring at the sky like it might whisper an answer. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, orange and defiant, as if daring the night to steal its place. Seong-Min didn't turn when she approached. He just murmured, "In my world, honor was survival, but here, you get to choose what matters." Sierra stepped beside him. "And what do you choose?" He glanced down at her, eyes gentle. "I'm still learning, but your world lets the heart breathe. That is new to me." She slipped her hand into his, and this time he squeezed back. No hesitation, no pride, just presence, the kind that didn't need a throne to be noble. The storm had passed, not the one in the sky, but the one in their lives. For now, it was one of those slow-burning Georgia mornings. the kind where the air smelled like warm cedar and cicadas hadn't quite begun their racket yet. Sierra stepped onto the porch, barefoot, a glass of cold sweet tea in one hand and a box in the other. Seong-Min looked up from his seat. He was trying, and failing, to assemble a garden chair from IKEA. The instructions lay in a defeated pile beside him. "I have bested warlords," he grunted, "but not this cursed plank of false wood." She smirked. "You put the armrest on backwards, Romeo." "I followed the scroll. That's a blueprint." "A blueprint of lies," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. She laughed, dropped a kiss on his cheek, and plopped down beside him, the box landing between them with a soft thud. He raised an eyebrow. "Another test from your world?" "No," she said quietly. "These are mine." She opened the box. Inside were worn leather notebooks, edges soft from years of handling. A few pages peeked out, corners curled, some ink smudged. "They're journals," Sierra explained. "I started writing after I came back." The air shifted, softer now, slower. Seong-Min's smile faded into something more reverent. "You wrote of me?" Sometimes I just wrote to stay sane." She pulled out the first one, flipping through until she found a passage. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from memory. October 2nd. "I hate the silence. It's not even silence. Not really. It's his absence echoing in everything. The wind feels too still without his voice in it." She looked at him. He said nothing, but his hand found hers beneath the journal, anchoring her. She continued. December 19th, tried to watch a Kdrama for comfort, ended up yelling at the screen because none of them were him. They all bow too fast, love too easily, cry too pretty. He didn't cry pretty. He just clenched his jaw and walked away like love was a war. That made him chuckle. That is disturbingly accurate. Sierra smiled faintly, but her eyes brimmed. "There were days I convinced myself I imagined you." "I did the same," he murmured. "But you never faded. You haunted me with kindness." She reached deeper into the box, pulling out a folded piece of paper, a letter, dated the night before her TED Talk in Toronto. "I'm going to be on a stage tomorrow, speaking about courage. Funny, right? When I can't even say your name out loud without falling apart. Seong-Min, I didn't just leave you. I left the version of me that felt whole." His eyes glistened. "Why show me this now?" "Because you're here," she whispered, "and I need you to know what it cost to survive without you." Seong-Min leaned back, resting his head against the porch post, staring out at the open fields where Onyx now grazed like a content, retired champion. Then, gently, he picked up a journal. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. He turned to a random page, then laughed. Actually laughed. A deep, chest-warming sound that startled a bird from the railing. "What?" she asked, smiling despite herself. "April 14th. I saw a guy at Whole Foods in a robe and sandals and nearly screamed. Turns out he wasn't a time-traveling prince, just a barefoot yoga instructor named Skylar. Skylar drinks turmeric milk and believes in past lives. I wanted to punch him." Seong-Min chuckled again. "This Skylar is very brave. Skylar has a man bun and smells like lavender doom. You'd hate him." "I already do." They laughed, hard, together, then silence. Not empty this time. Full, sacred. He reached across the box, touched the edge of one worn journal. "You kept your grief in ink," he said. "And in memory," she replied. Seong-Min looked at her. No pretense, no armor. "I would have traded kingdoms for a single word from you." She touched his cheek. "You have the rest of them now." He leaned in, not to kiss, but to press his forehead to hers. There, on the porch where stories collided and time folded in on itself, They sat wrapped in late morning light and soft confessions. Two people, one past, a future neither of them dared to hope for until now. It started with a twitch. Sierra had just finished brushing Onyx down in the paddock behind the house when the wind shifted. The skies above Georgia, usually as mellow as a gospel hum, turned a sullen gray. Thunder growled once, and Onyx changed. His ears pinned back, his powerful muscles bunched like coiled rope. He threw his head, snorting sharply, nostrils flared, Sierra's brow furrowed. She knew this horse like she knew the backs of her own hands. This wasn't nerves. This was memory. Hey, easy, baby, she whispered, placing a hand against his slick coat. It's just weather. But he wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking past it, into something only he remembered. That same storm, that same night, that same world they had both bled to escape. Meanwhile, at the far edge of the property, Seong-Min was on his knees in the soil beside an elderly man with sharp eyes and the posture of a retired general. Elijah Vaughn, Sierra's grandfather. You planting that thing backwards, Elijah grunted, watching the prince struggle to dig a trench with the wrong end of the trowel. I am testing your tools. They are inefficient, Seong-Min shot back, wiping his brow. Elijah snorted. You don't need swords and scrolls to grow mint, son. Seong-Min looked down at the tiny sprouts with something akin to reverence. I want her to have something rooted, he murmured. Elijah's eyebrows rose. A garden? A bridge, Seong-Min corrected. Between her world and mine. Between then and now. There was a beat of silence. The wind tugged at the edges of their shirts. That's a fine idea, Elijah said finally. But if you call these tomatoes war fruit again, I'm revoking your shovel. Later that evening, Sierra stood at the edge of the paddock again, her hair tied up, jeans smeared with dirt and hay. Onyx paced in circles, restless, his hooves leaving deep imprints in the wet earth. She clicked her tongue. You're working yourself up, old man. But he wasn't pacing randomly. He was circling her, deliberately, eyes on hers. Sierra stepped back, suddenly aware. This was exactly what he had done all those years ago, in the palace arena, when Seong-Min asked her to train his men. Seong-Min, she called over her shoulder. He was already coming, towel slung over one shoulder from the garden, dirt under his nails. He stopped beside her and followed her gaze. Onyx was now still, watching them. A sentinel between timelines. Seong-Min's voice was low. He remembers. Sierra swallowed hard. I think so too. They stood together in silence, hands brushing but not quite clasped, as the last thunder faded and the sky cracked open to release soft rain. The smell of damp earth, herbs, and horse sweat wrapped around them like a familiar cloak. Seong-Min glanced at her. You don't have to outrun your past, Sierra. You just have to know what part of it still lives. She looked up at him. Is that why you're building the garden? He didn't answer. He just leaned forward, tucked a curl behind her ear, and kissed her forehead like a promise he hadn't yet spoken aloud. And behind them, Onyx blew out a long, steady breath, then took one deliberate step forward. Seong-Min had fought in wars, debated scholars, and stared down assassins with a steel gaze that never wavered. But nothing prepared him for Incheon International Airport. Are these carriages? He asked, standing frozen as the automatic doors whooshed open before him. Nope, Sierra said, suppressing a grin. Sliding doors. Welcome to South Korea. He turned to her sharply. They opened on their own. They do that, she said lightly, grabbing the handle of their suitcase. Technology. It's wild. His gaze darted to a cleaning robot gliding silently across the marble floor. And that? Is it sentient? Sierra laughed, loud and real, linking her arm through his. It's a vacuum, Seong-Min. Relax. We're not in a science fiction movie. Yet. They stayed in a hanok nestled in the heart of Bukchon, with paper doors and tiled roofs that reminded Seong-Min of a life he had once worn like skin. The first night, Sierra found him in the courtyard, crouched beside a stone basin of water, his reflection rippling. This world doesn't carry your weight, he said softly. She turned to him, frowning. You mean it doesn't carry yours either? He looked at her. His voice dropped. No, I don't belong here, but I'm trying, because you do. Over the next few days, they walked through Seoul like old souls seeing it for the first time. Sierra guided him through street food stalls in Gwangjang Market, laughing when he nearly choked on spicy tteokbokki. You didn't say it was lava, he rasped, eyes watering. I did. You said you feared nothing. I fear nothing, except this dish. He stared down the spicy rice cakes like they owed him an apology. In Insadong, he tried on a modern hanbok and stood in front of the mirror longer than expected. Looks good on you, Sierra said gently, arms crossed. I feel like a shadow wearing a memory, he said, voice low. Familiar, but different. And when they visited Gyeongbogung Palace, its restored courtyards echoing with tourists and reenactments, Seong-Min stood unmoving at the gate for several minutes. Sierra reached for his hand. Talk to me, she whispered. His fingers wrapped around her slowly as if anchoring himself. I walked these grounds when they were quiet, he murmured, when the stones were raw, when people bowed because they feared what I might become. Sierra squeezed his hand. And now? His gaze didn't move. Now they walked through my kingdom like it was a stage. He swallowed. But it survived. Without me. Later that evening, they wandered a quieter path through a nearby historical village. Lamps glowed golden. Cicadas sang their ancient song. Sierra leaned into him, tired but happy. You okay? She asked. Seong-Min looked up at the sloping, tiled roofs, where tradition bowed quietly beneath the shadows of power lines and LED signs. They preserved what they could, he said, voice low, but this isn't what I knew. Sierra stayed quiet. He turned to her, eyes softer now. Still, I want to learn it, if you're the one showing me. She looked at him, really looked, not as a prince lost to history, but as a man choosing love in a world not made for him. You already are, she whispered, and there, under the wooden eaves of a home rebuilt from memory, she slipped her hand into his again, and this time, he didn't let go for hours. The tailor raised an eyebrow. So, no tie? Seong-Min stood like a statue on the platform, arms out, jaw tight. The fabric was fine, the cut was elegant, but none of it made sense. This is a strange kind of armor, he muttered. What war does this fight? Sierra laughed from the corner. Office politics. He didn't know what that meant, but he didn't like it. You look like someone who walked off the cover of Forbes Seoul, Sierra said from the couch, sipping iced coffee and trying not to drool. The hair down? With that jawline? Sir, please. He side-eyed her through the mirror. Why must modern clothes have no dignity? This jacket has no buttons for a sword. Because you're not attending a duel. You're going on a date with your very patient girlfriend. He rolled his eyes dramatically. In my world, formal wear meant robes and purpose. Here, she said, standing to adjust his collar, it means dinner and dessert, possibly involving cheesecake. At the mention of dessert, he blinked. Later that day, it was Sierra's turn to surprise him. She stepped out of the guest house bedroom in a crimson hanbok, embroidered with delicate golden cranes, the soft white silk sleeves whispering against her sides. Her hair was braided with silk thread, a quiet nod to both old and new. Seong-Min, seated at the small table adjusting his cufflinks, looked up and froze. His hands dropped. His breath caught. Sierra, she bit her lip. Too much? But he didn't answer. Not right away. His gaze was fixed, not just on her, but through her, like he was watching two versions of the same moment in time layered over each other. That night, he finally said, his voice lower, steadier, at the lake, you wore crimson then too. Her smile softened. Lanterns across the water, drums in the distance. You were across the circle, he said, and still the only thing I saw. A long pause. You look like prophecy dressed as grace. Her cheeks flushed. That is, a lot, Prince. He stood slowly, stepped toward her. You wore that for me? She nodded, stepping closer until they were just inches apart. For you, for the past, and for tonight. His hand came up, reverent and steady, brushing a silken braid behind her ear. And the future? He whispered. Sierra's breath hitched. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because when he leaned in, the kiss was slow, certain, like the world had already written it down somewhere centuries ago, and they were just stepping into its rhythm. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was sacred. And when they parted, foreheads pressed together, Sierra murmured, "This isn't my world anymore." And Seong-Min answered, "No, it's ours now." Their next stop, H Mart, a fluorescent-lit wonderland of sauces, snacks, and confusion. Seong-Min leaned over a display of cup noodles like he was decoding a royal treaty. These are food? Instant ramen, Sierra explained. 3 minutes, water, done. He narrowed his eyes. It has no soul, she grinned. Wait till you try it with egg and scallions. Moments later, they turned a corner, and he froze again. A wall of kimchi. He turned to her, solemn. This many jars of fermented cabbage should be a sign of war, not peace. But it was the bubble tea that betrayed him. Sierra handed him a cold cup with brown sugar tapioca pearls swaying in caramel-colored milk. What is it? He asked. Magic. Not literal, she warned. It's called boba. Drink it. He sipped, paused, chewed. His eyes widened. It is strange and chewy, but oddly comforting. She burst out laughing. Congratulations, you're officially Gen Z. He blinked. Is that a title? No. Baby, it's a vibe. That night, their date didn't end in a 5-star restaurant or glowing palace. Instead, it ended under string lights in the tiny Hanok courtyard, where they sat on woven cushions, eating hot tok from a sizzling pan. The stars blinked quietly above. Soft Korean ballads played from Sierra's phone, set on the low table beside a half-empty bottle of plum wine. As she chewed the last sticky rice cake, Seong-Min extended a hand. She arched a brow. What? He stood. Dance with me. There's no music. There's enough. So she let him pull her to her feet. Barefoot in the courtyard, hanbok and suit jacket loosened, they danced slowly beneath the lights, swaying to nothing and everything. He rested his forehead to hers. You've shown me more than time, he whispered. You've shown me joy. She closed her eyes. Then let's keep chasing it. And they danced long into the night. Awkward at first, then real, then tender, as if 2 centuries had finally learned to breathe in sync. The morning mist clung to the Georgia hills like a secret not ready to lift. Seong-Min stood by the fence, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sky was just beginning to lighten. His hands were tucked behind his back, posture regal even now, but his heart was doing something far less dignified, It was racing. He felt it every time he looked at her. Every time Sierra laughed and didn't realize how loud it was. Every time she shouted at the TV during horse documentaries. Every time she reached for his hand in public like she wasn't afraid to claim him in front of the whole world. He had fought for kingdoms. But this was the scariest battle of all. Down the hill, Sierra's grandfather leaned back in a rocking chair, sipping his morning mint tea like he'd been waiting for Seong-Min all along. "You gonna keep pacing or sit a spell? Your royal nerves?" the old man called. Seong-Min froze, then approached with the slow, deliberate gait of a man both noble and terrified. "I need your help," he said simply. The old man raised a brow. "If this is about fixing the toaster again..." "No, it's about Sierra." The chair creaked to a stop. "She has given me everything," Seong-Min continued, voice low. "A second chance. A world I didn't understand. Laughter in place of war." "How does a man in your world ask for a woman's hand?" he asked. The old man looked up from his tea, with respect, with sincerity, and usually with a ring. Seong-Min frowned. A ring? A circle, no beginning, no end, a symbol. "Ah!" He nodded slowly, then muttered, "In my time, we bound promises with silk and fire. Yours prefers gemstones and vows." "I wish to ask her to become my wife," Seong-Min finished, "and I would be honored if you helped me prepare something worthy of her." 3 days later, Sierra was busy at the local riding clinic, teaching a group of spirited middle schoolers how not to scream when a horse so much as sneezed. She had no idea that 2 scheming men were at home in the barn, wielding power tools. "Are you sure she doesn't suspect?" Seong-Min asked, crouched behind a stack of hay bales as he sanded the edges of a wooden box. "She thinks you're cleaning out the feed room," her grandfather said, squinting through his reading glasses as he carved the inside of the lid. "Which, technically, you are, just also building a future." The box was small, handmade, elegant, Korean chestnut wood smoothed to velvet. On the inside, they carved a line from one of Sierra's own journal entries, one Seong-Min had memorized the moment he read it. "I wasn't supposed to stay, but love made me forget the exit." He pressed a velvet pouch inside, a simple, classic ring, platinum, no frills, except a sapphire so deep it looked like a midnight sky had been caught and cut into stone. "I will hide it here," Seong-Min said, sliding the box into the back of her barn locker. "She finds peace in this place. I want her to find forever here, too." That night, Seong-Min walked with Onyx in the pasture. The stallion had grown stronger, more settled again. He nuzzled the prince's shoulder gently as if to say, "I see you." Seong-Min looked around, confirming Sierra wasn't nearby, then cleared his throat. "May I rehearse something?" he asked the horse. Onyx snorted and swished his tail. The prince smiled faintly. "Good." He inhaled, then spoke slowly. "Sierra Vaughn, in my world, honor was survival. Power was currency. Love was silent." He paused. "But you were thunder. You shattered silence. You never bowed. You gave me a world I never imagined. A future I never knew I wanted." He swallowed. "And now, I ask, may I give you forever?" Onyx pawed the ground. Seong-Min let out a breath, touched the velvet pouch hidden in his robe, and looked to the sky. Calm, clear, full of stars. "She gave me a future," he whispered. "I want to give her forever." It was the kind of day that didn't ask for anything. The sky had stretched itself into soft hues of gold and cotton blue, the morning dew already rising off the grass like breath from the earth. The Georgia hills glowed with summer heat, and Sierra's laughter rang out across the pasture like something sacred. "You said what to Gene when you first met him?" she asked, gripping the reins as Onyx flicked his ears. Seong-Min sat tall on the other horse beside her, still learning the more casual trot, but as regal in flannel as he'd once been in silk. I said, "Step aside before I forget you are not my servant." Seong-Min's voice was flat, unapologetic. Sierra burst into full-on laughter, the kind that made her lean forward in the saddle. "You didn't." "He was blocking the door," the prince replied, brushing a fly from his brow, "and wearing sandals with socks." "You really are a menace," she said, shaking her head. He tilted his head. "I believe the word you used earlier was charming." "That was before I found out you threatened a teenager over footwear." By late afternoon, they were back home. The dinner table was loud, filled with the crackling sound of cornbread, roasted vegetables, fried okra, and her grandfather's never-ending commentary. "I don't trust biscuits that come out of a can," he muttered, poking one suspiciously with a fork. "They're fine, Grandpa," Sierra sighed. Seong-Min leaned in, whispering behind his napkin. Did the biscuit insult him? Sierra giggled. "Don't egg him on." Her grandfather caught them whispering. "You whispering like two school kids don't make me blind, you know. What's going on over there?" "Nothing," Sierra said, cheeks flushed, suddenly aware of Seong-Min's hand resting near hers beneath the table. Something about today felt different, slower, thicker, like time was letting them savor it. As the sun dipped toward the ridge, Sierra pulled him toward her favorite field, untamed, full of wildflowers and tall grass, a space that seemed to hum with all the versions of herself she'd ever been. They walked in silence for a long stretch. Then Seong-Min broke it. "When I was a boy, I used to wonder what the world outside my kingdom looked like," he said. "I never imagined it would be this." She looked at him. "This is chaos, Seong-Min. Microwaves and TikTok and taxes. This is the wild." He smiled faintly, eyes fixed ahead. "I like your wild." She exhaled slowly, letting the breeze carry the moment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "leaving everything?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward the trees, where the edge of the sky was beginning to darken with clouds. But his voice, when it came, was firm. "No, because everything I left was duty, and everything I found was you." They stood in the middle of the field, the wildflowers dancing around them. He could have done it then. Pulled the ring from his pocket, dropped to one knee, told her she was his compass, his home, his one true thread. But instead, he just looked at her and reached for her hand. Sierra tilted her head. "What?" "I don't want to waste this day with grand speeches," he said softly. "I just want to be here, with you, now." They lay back on the grass, her head on his shoulder, the scent of honeysuckle rising in the air around them. The world was quiet, almost too quiet, and then a low, distant rumble. Thunder. Sierra sat up slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. Was that? Seong-Min's fingers grazed the box in his pocket. He closed his hand around it tightly, grounding himself. Not yet, but soon. Ta, the wind shifted. Not the kind that danced through trees or cooled summer sweat. This wind had weight. It pressed down on the hills, rolled like something ancient through the grass, and by noon the sky had dimmed, clouds thick and bruised, clinging low like they were too heavy to rise. Sierra paused on the porch steps, wiping her hands on a towel. The screen door creaked behind her, and she turned as Seong-Min stepped out. He looked off. His posture was still upright, but his shoulders were tense, and there was something distant in his eyes. "You okay?" she asked, drying her palms. He blinked. "Yes." too fast. She walked to him and reached up, pressing her hand gently to his forehead. No fever, but his skin was cooler than it should have been. "Liar," she said softly. His eyes flicked toward the sky. "Does this storm feel wrong to you?" She hesitated. It did. It wasn't the thunder that scared her. It was the silence between the rolls. Too thick. Too long. "I don't know," she admitted. "It just feels big." He nodded once. "Yes, that's it. Big. Like the air is holding its breath." Later that afternoon, Sierra saddled Onyx to ride, hoping a quick run would shake the unease from her chest. But the stallion wouldn't move. He stood stock still in the paddock, eyes wide, nostrils flared. "Hey, boy," she said gently, reaching for his mane. "It's okay. Just a storm." But Onyx snorted and stepped back, ears pinned. Seong-Min leaned against the fence nearby. His face had grown paler. "He remembers," he murmured. Sierra glanced at him. "What?" "That storm. It brought me to your world." He pressed a hand to his temple. "And now, it's like something is unraveling again." She stepped closer. "You're scaring me." His lips parted to reassure her. Probably, but nothing came. Instead, he turned away abruptly and stumbled. "Seong-Min!" She rushed forward and caught his arm. "You're dizzy again." "It's gotten worse all day," he admitted, closing his eyes. "I thought it would pass, but it's like the wind keeps pulling at me, like my bones are caught in something I can't see." She guided him to the porch, panic starting to claw at the edges of her voice. Okay, we're going to sit, breathe. I'll get you something." He tried to smile. "I've never liked storms, even as a boy. They always came with something lost." That night, the wind screamed, not through windows, but across the fields, through the old oak trees, through every crack in the wood like it was searching for a way in. The power flickered once, twice, then went dark. Sierra stood in the kitchen, flashlight in hand, staring at the old breaker box while rain hit the roof like fists. Behind her, she heard a crash. "Seong-Min?" she called. No answer. She ran to the living room and found him on his knees, one hand gripping the side of the couch, the other pressed to his chest. His face was ashen, eyes glassy. Hey! She dropped beside him. "Breathe. Just breathe, you hear me?" He looked up at her, and what she saw there wasn't fear. It was heartbreak. "It's pulling again," he whispered, "like before. I can feel it." "No." She shook her head, tears forming instantly. "No. You're here now. You're not going anywhere." But he swayed, and then he collapsed, right into her arms. Sierra knelt on the floor, holding him, her breath ragged. Thunder cracks like the sound of a splitting stone. Lightning floods the room for a second, and in that second, she grips him tighter, whispering over and over, "Don't you dare leave me." The rain had stopped, but the storm wasn't over. It lingered in the air, in the thick, bruised sky, and the silence that stretched too long between breaths. Sierra sat curled on the couch, knees hugged to her chest, eyes fixed on the man sleeping beside her. Seong-Min's breathing had evened out, but his skin still ran too cold. She brushed his hair back, fingers trembling. "You said you weren't afraid," she whispered. "But I am." He stirred slightly but didn't wake. Across the room, the door creaked open. Her grandfather stepped inside, his coat dripping from the storm. In his hand, an old cloth-wrapped book. "I found something," he said quietly. "You need to see this." They moved to the kitchen, voices hushed. The book was ancient, parchment pages worn to velvet at the edges, ink faded but legible. Sierra's grandfather opened it to the marked page. "There's a pattern in the records," he said, pointing. "Storms like this, every few generations, the same time of year, always tied to someone who left or returned." Sierra leaned in. "This isn't about time travel, is it?" He shook his head. "It's not about where. It's about when and what the world can hold." She swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He tapped the page. "There's a line, translated from the Sobek scrolls. 'He who walks where he was, never meant to stand, will tear the fabric until the world demands balance.'" She blinked. "The thread?" He nodded. "Not a bridge, a consequence." Later that night, Sierra called in a favor. An old college friend, Dr. Leah Chang, historian, polyglot, and one of the few people Sierra trusted with the truth. They met at a closed wing of the university's museum. Dim lights, rain streaking the tall windows. Old glass cases lined the walls, filled with relics from a forgotten kingdom that no longer had a name. Leah spread out a collection of translated fragments. "It's not a prophecy," she said. "It's physics wearing poetry. What your prince survived wasn't supposed to last." Sierra's stomach dropped. "How long?" Leah didn't look up. "Once the thread snaps fully, the world resets. The storm resets. Everything he is will be taken back." Sierra's hands curled into fists. "So what do we do?" Leah hesitated. "There's no door to walk through, no spell to break. The only solution is to anchor him in this world, not just emotionally, legally, biologically, permanently." "Legally?" Sierra asked, her voice dry. "Citizenship, employment, medical records, everything." "And biologically?" Leah gave her a grim smile. "If his DNA becomes part of a new future here, the universe will have to make room." Sierra froze. "Are you saying he has to?" "I'm saying," Leah said softly, "this isn't a fairy tale. It's consequence wrapped in romance. You get 72 hours. Sierra's eyes burned. "Before what?" "Before he's erased." Back at the farmhouse, Sierra stood in the barn, staring at Onyx. The stallion met her eyes with that same knowing look, that ancient calm. Behind her, Seong-Min stepped into the doorway, still pale but upright. "What did she say?" he asked. Sierra turned. Her voice barely made it past her throat. "We have 3 days." He exhaled slowly. Then, "Let's make every hour matter." The countdown has started, and Sierra must fight not just for love, but for the future itself. Time wasn't slipping anymore. It was sprinting. Sierra felt it every time she looked at him. The way Seong-Min's steps were just a little heavier, the way his eyes dimmed slightly when the wind picked up. He smiled through it, bravely, fully. But she saw the edges fraying. So they didn't waste a second. The kitchen was filled with the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic. Seong-Min held a wooden spoon like it might be a weapon. Sierra tried not to laugh as he squinted at the bubbling stew. "It's just chicken," she said, sliding beside him and adding a pinch of thyme. "Not a dragon." "Your mother's recipe book has more spells than your grandfather's scrolls," he grumbled. She bumped his hip with hers. "Keep stirring. You're doing great." He peeked down at the open page. Mama Vaughn's chicken stew, made with love and too much butter. "I think she and I would have made good allies," Seong-Min said. Sierra's smile flickered, soft and deep. "She would have adored you." They walked the old path Sierra used to ride as a teen. Bare earth, thick trees, wind that whispered through tall grass. She led him past a rusted fence where the wildflowers grew stubborn and bright. "This is where I first told my granddad I wanted to be a writer." Seong-Min bent, brushing his fingers along a yellow bloom. Did he believe you? Always. He stood again and took her hand. Then I believe in you too. Whatever life you choose, I want to walk it with you. That night, they sat under the string lights of the barn, cross-legged on a wool blanket. Onyx stood nearby, watching them like an old guardian. Sierra opened a small leather notebook. Let's write vows, she said. We're not married yet, he teased. Who said vows were only for weddings? He tilted his head, then slowly nodded. All right, you first. She hesitated, then started writing. Her hand shook. It's hard. Because you don't know what to promise? No. Because I want to promise everything. He leaned over and gently kissed her temple. They took turns writing, silent, smiling, sometimes crying. The next morning, Sierra handed Seong-Min a pocket knife. Tradition, she said. The old wood of the stable door stood in front of them, marked with years of horses' names, initials, and faded symbols. He glanced at her, uncertain. Your turn, she whispered. With slow, deliberate movements, he carved S+S, just beneath where her mother had once carved R. Vaughn, 1986. When he stepped back, he looked oddly proud. Now we are carved into time, he murmured. She took his hand and squeezed it. Always. The sun had begun to set, casting the sky in 100 shades of honey and rose. They sat together on the hill above the barn. Seong-Min knelt in front of her. Not with a ring, just with reverence. He took her hand gently, kissed each knuckle, and looked into her soul like he was memorizing every piece of it. If I disappear, he said, voice steady despite the quiver in it, I'll still be yours. Sierra's eyes welled. Don't say that. I must. His thumb brushed away her tears. Because love doesn't die with time. It lives in defiance of it. Her lips trembled. He leaned closer. I will always find my way back to you, he whispered. I am yours. Always. Then he kissed her. Not a desperate kiss, but a vow. One sealed not with rings, but with soul. The wind was soft. The sky sighed. And for a few quiet moments, the world held its breath. The willow tree was in full bloom. Its long, pale green strands swayed in the afternoon breeze, brushing the earth like fingers saying prayers. The meadow behind Sierra's farmhouse glowed under the weight of golden hour. Fireflies blinked early in the tall grass. The air smelled like honeysuckle and wood smoke and something hopeful. Sierra stood barefoot on the path, laughing as she tried to braid her curls with one hand. Granddad said you're going to trip over yourself in those loose straps, she murmured aloud, then smiled and shook her head. You'd be late to your own wedding, she said to herself. She didn't know yet. She didn't know he was already watching her. From behind the field's edge, Seong-Min exhaled slowly. He wore a simple linen shirt and jeans. Today, he wasn't a prince. He was a man about to give everything. In his pocket, a carved wooden box warmed against his chest. Inside, a ring, platinum, handcrafted by a local blacksmith Sierra's grandfather had trusted for decades. The stone in the center wasn't a diamond. It was a stone that spoke of forever. He stepped forward, each stride deliberate, steady. Breath caught somewhere between terror and peace. And then, a sound, low, deep, unnatural, like the earth itself gritting its teeth. Seong-Min froze mid-step. The air warped. The leaves on the willow snapped in every direction at once. A distant wind turned inward, spiraling above them, silent at first. Then a thunderous crack split the sky like torn fabric. Sierra looked up. No, she whispered. Seong-Min's body tensed. His face, just seconds ago soft and sure, went blank with terror. He tried to take one more step, but his foot never touched the ground. Instead, light, bright, colorless, soundless, rushed around him, dragging against his figure like invisible chains pulling taut. Sierra screamed, "Seong-Min!" He looked at her, and she saw it. Just for a second. The look of realization. Not surprise, not fear, regret. "No, no!" she shouted, racing toward him. The light thickened, flickering. He opened his mouth. "Sierra," but his voice was swallowed. 1 second he was there, arm outstretched, eyes locked on hers. The next, he was gone. The willow bowed under the storm's collapse. Rain followed instantly, violent, merciless, as if the sky itself broke with her. Sierra dropped to her knees. The earth met her like stone. Her clothes soaked in seconds. Her arms clutched the place where he had stood. Her sobs hitched out of her chest so hard she couldn't breathe. "No, no, no." She gasped, curled forward, her forehead in the mud. Her fingers clawed the ground like she could dig him back. Her grandfather's voice was distant behind her. She couldn't hear him. She only saw the place where love had almost lived forever, where a ring never left his pocket, where her world shattered again. And then, the silence. The unbearable kind. That sits behind every what if. The storm passed, but she didn't move. The willow wept with her, and time, once again, did not care.